Have you ever just sat down with the thought of a nasty comment somebody made, or maybe even a difficult conversation you had with a parent, boss, friend, even thinking about everything they said and all the things you should have said, and sort of getting into this mental spiral? Cause same. Welcome back to yet another episode of Go Figure. My name is Yamuna, and today we will get down the rabbit hole of mental health and corporate life. And the more I think of it, I strongly feel that so much of what we know about mental health, resilience, and how we cope with certain things in our life, I think is inevitably passed down from our previous generations. The missing piece in this puzzle, however, is the fact that their challenges, situations, and circumstances were so different compared to the ones that we deal with today, because the context is so fundamentally different. And I think that really questions the relevance of everything that we know. For instance, corporate culture was not really a thing back then. In the past, of course, work was important, and maybe we have seen this with our parents, our grandparents' generation as well, where for them it was more or less means to an end to support their family, get a pension, check out, and that's that. Although now, for us, with especially millennials and Gen Z becoming the majority of the workforce as well, work is so central to our identities, our self worth, self esteem, and how we perceive life in general has sort of altered as well. And this is not even something we do consciously anymore, it's just what is, and we constantly make our jobs a bigger deal than what it is. People often tell us, you need to love what you do, you need to prioritize your careers, you need to have elevator pitches ready and post on LinkedIn, and sort of sustaining in this entire ecosystem has sort of brought on that mindset onto us. And I am guilty of the fact that so many times when people ask me, introduce yourself, how long does it take us to bring up our job? 30 seconds, maybe even a minute. And again, this is not something I'm doing in my full conscience. It's just that my personal perception towards the job is so well ingrained in my brain that sometimes it's hard to distinguish the two, unless and until I'm intentionally avoiding to say something. I often say it out loud and I'm like, hey, this is my name and this is what I do. And honestly, for me, it takes 10 to 20 seconds and I'm constantly trying to figure that out and, work through it. And the big picture through all of this is truly our mental health implications, because when work becomes so critical to our identities and self worth, things like failure and burnout, they start to feel a lot more personal. They're no longer just limited, to our jobs, or it's no longer systemic. And we will start to see that the stakes become that much higher, like emotionally and mentally as well, because our highs and lows at jobs suddenly become the highs and lows of our life, which is not truly the case. So I think we need to constantly be intentional about the fact that we draw that line and we rationalize every time we find ourselves in that spiral. We start to think that everything that happens at job has to do with my life. And this is exactly why when, let's say, we receive critical feedback for a project you did or a presentation, even, it hurts a bit. It hurts before you can actually get to the constructive side of things, because we do tend to take it personally. And it's not as simple as saying, hey, you know what, you shouldn't take it personally, because it's a lot more nuanced than that. Because one of the critical aspects is the fact that, you put in time and effort and it truly mattered to you. So maybe you're just bummed out, to say the least. But on the other side, and at a more deeper level, it's the fact that the validation we receive for a job is a validation we translate to and take up as a person and as an individual, right? Because which means that if you are criticizing my job, you're criticizing me as a person. And I think that's why a lot of us don't know how to respond well to criticism at work. And maybe the person who is giving you the feedback is coming from a good place. Maybe they do want you to do well and get better or whatever, but it does sort of question the kind of mindset you come with. Because if you think any feedback there means any feedback to you as a person, they're never going to actually be able to take it at face value and run with it. Being in the corporate life for quite some time now, I've come to realize that if we don't intentionally, draw these boundaries and sort of, try to distinguish, at least, every time you get down that spiral, just having to remind yourself that, what, you are not your job. That's really it. If we don't do that early and consistently enough, these jobs tend to consume us, because there will be a day when you can't define who you are without your job and vice versa. And I think That's a really risky place to be in, especially if you are, young and just starting off your career. It's always easier to have this sort of a mindset shift right from the beginning because, once you're too deep into it, I think it becomes that much more harder. So, my first corporate job and the longest one so far had me by its hook. I did all of it, I worked long hours almost every day. I worked over the weekend sometimes. I ditched my friends to work on something because everything was a priority at all times. I lived with my parents at the time, but I barely got to see them while being in the same house. I forgot to have my meals, and all for what? Because of the illusion of a career and growth. And I'll be honest, I have been somebody who cared quite a bit about, career growth and promotions and all of that. But there was this one time where things got really messy at work. It was basically a situation where I had to put my foot down and say no to an offer that was made by a senior leader because he claimed that that was the best thing for me, that was the right thing for me to do. Initially, I must say I was quite thrown off by the fact that people have the audacity to decide on your behalf, and that insist and impose those decisions on you. But because I held my ground, and I think they did take it quite personally, and everything that followed thereon was quite dramatic, it was political, it was messy to say the least, and it got a lot more trickier because then they used this to sort of withhold my promotion. And now when I am past that phase, like it all seems so trivial, but at the time I decided to even like contest that decision, and I gave them facts, and there was no way that they wouldn't give me the promotion, and they did. So a year after that, I ended up resigning, which was my plan all along, and which is why I never took up that job offer, the other offer that came out. But that said, it took me getting out of that bubble to truly see the reality of things. And it made me question like this whole idea and the desire for promotions and career growth, is it really what we want? Or is it something they made us think that we want it because it floats their boat, it rocks it, because it helped them keep up with their system and the way corporate works. And I am not here to diss that you shouldn't be looking at growth, and I think it's absolutely necessary. But my point is really, don't become all about it, you know, because trust me, I've been there, and it's so shitty. Because once you step out and you're just like, oh my god, you wasted all those hours, all those catch ups with your friends, which would have been so much more wholesome over this, because you also start to see that it takes some level of toxicity to sustain toxic people and places, so situations like this, it sort of puts up a mirror in front of you to sort of question you that in 5 years or 3 years, whatever, are you comfortable becoming the person you see in front of you? You know, and I do think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that, we become the people we surround ourselves, which is why company becomes so important. I think ultimately what matters is just finding a sense of purpose and meaning in whatever you do. It could be the most mundane task. I bet you can find some tiny aspect of meaning, some relevance, some way that it appeals to you and can, get you to get out of your bed every day and go do your job and come back and still, be happy about it. And we want to do this regardless of the title, regardless of the made up bullshit in corporate, and I do think it's a tough mindset to sustain because there will always be people around you who have a different mindset, who think, titles are everything, hierarchy is everything, and they sort of like thrive on that bit of the power play. And for most people, I have seen that this whole made up titles and the corporate bullshit, it gives them a sense of power and control that they perhaps lack in their life otherwise. And for them somehow this is their play yard and they're gonna do whatever they want with it. And that's that. So I think it's important that we always sort of reflect on what our path is and just stay grounded on what truly matters. And I want to use this tiny platform to remind you that your job was and will always be a part of your big, big life. You're not your job. A mistake you made at work does not make you a bad person. A setback at job does not make you a failure. And your job is not your identity and it can never be, because You are and we are so much more than that. And I hope you can see that. And something that I've become so intentional about of late is drawing boundaries, especially in a professional setting, you know? And it does feel uncomfortable at first, I won't lie, because you're new to it, it's a new concept, it does invite some level of conflict. And I understand that not everybody is super comfortable with that. But sometimes it's also uncomfortable because of the fact that the people you're setting up a boundary with does not know how to respond to it. But regardless, the most important part about it is to stick with it, is to reinforce it, because trust me, otherwise, people will walk all over you. For me personally, having those stricter boundaries has always been a way of respecting myself and my life and my boundaries and limitations. You know, so I think it's really important that we set that up and make it quite evident to people, you know, not to say that things are unpredictable, we have to be flexible. Of course, that's just a given. But I'm saying don't make being flexible a brand for yourself. And for fuck's sake, check your people pleasing traits at the door, because trust me when I say this, nothing will burn you out faster than being a people pleaser at work. Nothing. Because the inability to say no, the inability to draw boundaries, and the constant need to please everybody, to keep everyone happy and play nice, it's not going to serve you well. Trust me when I say this, write it down, come back to this pod. But I have seen people pleasers all through my career, and it's not a very long career so far, but I have seen quite a few characters. And there are also people who suck up to the managers or higher ups for their own benefits, you know. But we all know how that ends. They do feel exploited at some point, because that was the whole setup all along. It's a one-way street, and there's only one way that's going to end as well. And my hot take is that if we don't say no enough, we'll never get the chance to say yes to the right things, you know, because you're too busy constantly dealing with the things that you are too afraid to say no to, and you'll miss out on all the things that could have actually worked out wonderfully well in your life and in your favor. And if you're a woman, you know, it comes with an added sense of duty and emotional labor sort of attached to it. And I've experienced this myself, you know. I've been in rooms where I've been called difficult just for being upfront and straight up. And when a man does the same thing, he's applauded for being assertive. And oh, you know what? He's such a good leader. And we see so much potential in him. And I'm left with the feeling of, oh, she's too tough and she's trying to be too tough and she does not know how to manage her emotions well, and all for just being as straight up as the man was. So somehow it's the place of expectation and the emotional labor that we carry as well. It's just so sad to see all of this happen in this day and age as well, you know. And I think we are to be blamed as well, because sometimes I think we assume responsibility without realizing the consequences in the grand scheme of things. And you know, it happens, you know, in a professional setting, personal setting, all of that, because we're conditioned in certain ways, so we assume that responsibility, thinking that that is our duty. If you were to take a second and reflect on who was the person who organized a team event last time, who was the person who got a cake for somebody's birthday, who's the one taking notes, and of course, not to forget now with AI, thank God for that. Maybe it's different, but conventionally speaking, you know, we're constantly doing all of this extra shit for no reason, you know. And sometimes we're expected to do it, and that's even sadder. We are so attuned to, you know, being helpful, being accommodative, playing nice and apologizing and over apologizing. Can I just say on behalf of a lot of women that I know, how fucking exhausting that is. You know, and the system is set up in a way that promotes this sort of behavior. It enables this sort of behavior even. I'm not going to reveal at what point of my career I did this, but I ran a social experiment at work. I chose 2 days from 2 different weeks to sort of test how people's perception changes when I say and behave differently. So, week one. That brings us to the end of part one of the two-part episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I will be back soon.